I yelled, "Please help. Somebody's killed my son."
That was Brandy Morning, mother of 15-year-old Khyler Edman, who was killed in the most horrific manner for doing just one thing: defending his 5-year-old sister from burglar.
There are few words to describe how horrific the crime was. No one should ever have to be a victim of a crime, but to be a young boy in the safety of his own home, he should never have been forced to know that kind of fear.
He should have turned 16. He should have graduated high school. He should have gone to prom, fallen in love, walked across a stage in a cap and gown. He should have grown up. But instead, Khyler Edman is remembered as something very few people, no matter their age, will ever be. A hero, and not in theory, not in fiction, not in a headline written after the fact. He became a hero in real time, in real danger, in the moment that would define everything that followed.
Any loss of life is a tragedy, but it seems when you're dealing with a child, it kind of hits and touches everyone just a little bit differently.
He was the kind of kid you trusted to babysit a sibling, run errands, or help a neighbor carry groceries. He had dreams, big ones. According to family statements and news interviews, Khyler wanted to become a first responder, possibly a firefighter or paramedic. He talked about it often. He wanted to help people. And on September 26, 2019, he did. When Ryan Cole broke into the Edman family home, Khyler did not run. He did not beg. He did not hide. He stood up. He confronted a violent intruder, likely armed with nothing but instinct and love for his little sister. He fought. And according to forensic evidence and law enforcement testimony, he gave everything to keep her safe.
The defendant ended the life of a young boy and forever changed the lives of Khyler's family and friends.
His 5-year-old sister survived that day, physically unharmed, because her brother died protecting her. Khyler's body was found near the front entrance. Defensive wounds on his arms, multiple stab wounds to his chest. He was 15 years old, and he died a warrior. Charlotte County Sheriff Bill Prummel, during multiple press conferences and media interviews, did not mince words. There's a special place in this world for young men like Khyler Edman. He acted with courage no one should ever have to show at his age. He saved a life, and he gave his own. Assistant State Attorney Rich Montecalvo echoed that sentiment. He did everything right, everything a big brother, a protector, should do. We will never forget him. This story is about a boy who died, but it's also about what he chose. He didn't choose violence. He didn't choose fear. He chose love and action. In the face of evil, unrelenting, drug-fueled, and violent, he held the line. And that line was the space between his sister and death. Hang on as we take you through the entire details of this horror case and tell you exactly how it played out. No fiction, only verified news and details of the case. If you love true crime stories in great detail like this, it is only right you hit the subscribe button and turn on the notification bell, because every day you will get stories that not just touch the soul, but unravel how cruel life can be.
Cases like this are why we have the death penalty in Florida.
September 26th, 2019. It was a Thursday, a typical, almost forgettable afternoon in Port Charlotte, Florida. The kind of day where everything blends into everything else. School had just let out. The skies were clear. The air was heavy with humidity and the faint scent of lawn trimmings and warm concrete. Kids pedaled bikes on sidewalks. A dog barked in the distance. Somewhere a lawnmower hummed. Nothing felt wrong. Not yet. In a modest home nestled in a quiet residential neighborhood, 15-year-old Khyler Edman was doing something many teenagers do, watching over his younger sibling. His 5-year-old sister was with him that day. Their mother had stepped out for a short time, trusting her responsible son to keep an eye on the house and his little sister. Khyler had done this before. He was known for being calm, helpful, mature, beyond his years. A good student, a protective older brother. And he was proud of that role, guardian of his baby sister when mom had errands to run. But what no one knew, what no one could have known, was that danger was already walking toward their door. Somewhere just a few blocks away, a barefoot man stumbled through backyards. He was bleeding. His shirt was gone. He was incoherent. Neighbors described him later as wild-eyed, like someone on the edge of consciousness, if not reality. Surveillance footage captured fragments of his movement earlier in the day, shirtless and pacing near homes. He had already broken into one house before arriving in the Edman neighborhood. But he wasn't done. Something was pushing him forward, through yards, through hedges, through fences. His name was Ryan Clayton Cole, and this wasn't his first brush with the law. Cole, 27 years old, had a long criminal record, multiple arrests, drug charges, theft, disorderly conduct, battery. He had spent time behind bars. He had reportedly battled methamphetamine addiction. He had also been Baker acted, meaning he had previously been held for involuntary psychiatric evaluation under Florida law. Yet somehow, on this September day, Cole was not in a treatment center. He wasn't incarcerated. He was walking barefoot and bleeding into a residential community full of children. Did he even know where he was going? Was this planned? Was it a targeted act? Was he trying to flee something or someone? Or was it simply chaos? Choosing his next home at random? That question still remains. There was no known connection between Cole and the Edman family. No warning, no threat, just a door, and what was waiting on the other side. Inside, Khyler may have heard the screen door creak, maybe the shuffle of shoes or bare feet against tile, maybe the sound of someone rattling a door frame. But when the intrusion began, he didn't run. He didn't hide. He didn't scream. Instead, Khyler Edman confronted the intruder. Let that sink in. A 15-year-old child, facing down a grown man, possibly armed, possibly drugged, bleeding, aggressive. And what was Khyler trying to protect? A wallet? A TV? No. He was protecting something far more valuable. His little sister. We may never know the full details of what happened inside those walls. No cameras, no witnesses, only the aftermath and the silence that followed. But we know from the blood evidence, from the coroner's report, from the damage to the home, that there was a struggle, a fight, and that Khyler gave everything he had. Have you ever wondered what you would do in a moment like that? Would you freeze? Would you run? Or would you fight to the end? Khyler Edman didn't ask questions. He didn't negotiate. He stood between a violent intruder and a defenseless child and refused to move. At that moment, he wasn't a teenager anymore. He wasn't a kid. He was something far more powerful, a shield. By the time deputies from the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office arrived, responding to reports of a suspicious individual bleeding in the street, it was already too late. They found Cole injured and bleeding on a nearby street. But as they traced his steps, as they followed the trail of blood, they arrived at the Edman house. And what they discovered inside would shake even the most hardened responders. Khyler was dead. He had been stabbed multiple times. His body was found near the entryway, his final stand. His 5-year-old sister was discovered alive, shaken but unharmed, because of him. What makes a child choose bravery over fear? What makes a teenager take on a man nearly twice his age? How many of us, fully grown, would do the same? Charlotte County Sheriff Bill Prummel, who would later speak about the case with visible emotion, said it plainly. There is a special place in hell for individuals like this. When you're dealing with a child, it hits differently. And it did. The case ignited local outrage, national headlines, and then it quieted again, because justice moves slowly, and mourning moves slower. In the weeks that followed, the community of Port Charlotte held vigils in Khyler's honor. Teachers remembered him as kind and protective. Friends called him loyal. His mother described him as her world. He wanted to be a first responder when he grew up, a firefighter, a paramedic. He wanted to protect people. And in the end, he did. He didn't wear a badge. He didn't carry a weapon. But he was a protector in every sense of the word. But what about the man who took all that away? Who was Ryan Cole? Why was he free that day? What drove him, bleeding, barefoot, out of his mind into a child's home? And could the system have stopped him before it was too late? That is where we go next. What do we really know about the man who walked barefoot into that Florida home and left behind the lifeless body of a child? What turns a man into a killer? What patterns did we miss? Because by the time Ryan Clayton Cole entered the Edman home on September 26th, 2019, the damage was already done. Let's rewind. Let's go back, not just to that day, but to the years leading up to it, because the story of Ryan Cole isn't just about that moment of violence. It's about the many red flags before it, and how those warnings went unheeded. Born in the early 1990s, Ryan Cole was no stranger to law enforcement. Public records and court documents reveal a long trail of criminal charges dating back several years before Khyler Edman's murder. In Florida alone, Cole had been arrested over 20 times. Yes, 20. His rap sheet included burglary, drug possession, trespassing, battery, violation of probation, theft, resisting arrest. By 2019, Ryan Cole was already known to authorities in Charlotte County and surrounding areas. He was in many ways a revolving door offender, in and out of jail, often reoffending shortly after release. He was repeatedly placed on probation, ordered into drug treatment, or handed short jail sentences. But was that enough? Did the system truly recognize the threat he posed? The answer, painfully, seems to be no. According to arrest reports, Cole was often intoxicated or under the influence of methamphetamines, a drug known to cause paranoia, hallucinations, and aggression. He had been involuntarily committed under the Baker Act at least once before. That means he was deemed a threat to himself or others. It means professionals had already seen the darkness flickering inside him. He had mental health evaluations. He was ordered to undergo substance abuse treatment. But Cole never stayed in these programs long. He often violated his probation and would either serve a few weeks in jail or be released again with conditions that he rarely followed. So the question becomes, how many chances should one man get? How many warning signs does it take before action becomes necessity? In the days leading up to the attack, Cole's behavior grew increasingly unstable. Witnesses reported him wandering barefoot through streets. He appeared agitated, incoherent, delusional. According to court documents later reviewed during the trial, Cole was under the influence of a combination of methamphetamine and synthetic cannabinoids at the time of the attack. Synthetic cannabinoids, often known by names like Spice or K2, can cause unpredictable behavior, psychosis, and violent outbursts. Add that to Cole's past, and it's a cocktail for disaster. During the sentencing phase, defense attorneys argued that Cole was in a drug-induced psychosis during the home invasion. They pointed to a history of childhood trauma, alleged bipolar disorder, and psychotic symptoms. A forensic psychologist who evaluated Cole testified that he suffered from a persistent mental illness, compounded by years of substance abuse. But prosecutors pushed back hard. They didn't deny his issues. They didn't ignore his pain. But they argued that Cole knew exactly what he was doing, that his decisions, getting high, breaking into homes, carrying a weapon, were part of a conscious, reckless pattern, one that had finally ended with the death of a child. And there's something else. Cole didn't just break into the Edman home. He had broken into another home just minutes earlier. Authorities believe he was attempting to flee from the first burglary when he entered Khyler's house. He was possibly looking for shelter, or escape, or maybe, as some investigators believe, he didn't care anymore who lived in the home he was about to enter. That is what makes it even more terrifying. Shortly after the attack, Cole was found by deputies just blocks away from the crime scene. He was bleeding heavily, injured, shirtless. Paramedics were called. At first, officers didn't realize what he had just done. He was taken into custody for burglary and resisting arrest. But as they followed the blood trail, as they knocked on the doors nearby, they came to the home of Khyler Edman and discovered the unimaginable. Cole was immediately charged with second-degree murder, later upgraded to first degree when the full scope of the crime became clear. He didn't just kill. He killed a child in his own home while the boy was protecting his baby sister. After Cole was arrested, the public began to ask hard questions. Why wasn't he already incarcerated? Why was a man with a long record, a documented drug problem, and a mental health history walking freely in a neighborhood filled with families? These questions were never fully answered, because there is no single answer. But the truth is this: Ryan Cole was not invisible. He was known. He was flagged. And yet no system, no service, no sentence had ever truly stopped him, until Khyler Edman did. The inhumanity of Ryan Cole isn't just in the killing. It's in how predictable it all feels in hindsight. How many other Ryans are out there? How many unstable, violent men slip through the cracks? And how many innocent families will pay the price? We go back to the Edman home, to those final moments, to the silent fight that left one brother dead and one little girl alive. Because now that we know who Ryan Cole was, we must return to what Khyler Edman did, what he gave, what he fought for, and what it cost him. We know how the story ends. We know the headlines. We know the mugshots. We know the courtroom verdict. But what we don't always see, what we don't always understand, are the moments in between, the fight, the fear, the final choice that no child should ever have to make. Because in the minutes before police arrived on Starlight Lane in Port Charlotte, inside that small single-story home, a 15-year-old boy was dying, and he knew it, but he refused to fall until his sister was safe. The house was like many in the neighborhood, quiet, modest, filled with family photos, children's toys, and the kind of warmth that makes a home feel lived in. But when deputies entered that space on the afternoon of September 26, 2019, it had become a crime scene. Blood stained the floors. Furniture was overturned. The air was heavy, stifling, humid, and still. At the center of it all was Khyler Edman. Investigators immediately knew something terrible had occurred. According to reports from the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office and later confirmed in court testimony, Khyler had suffered multiple stab wounds. His body was found near the front entrance of the house. He was positioned as if he had attempted to block or intercept the intruder. His 5-year-old sister was found in another room, physically unharmed but traumatized. The signs were unmistakable. There had been a struggle. There had been a fight. And Khyler had confronted Ryan Cole head-on, likely armed with nothing but his bare hands and his will to protect. Khyler was a high school student. He was not trained in combat. He had no weapon, no tactical advantage. Ryan Cole, on the other hand, was 27 years old, a grown man, a drug-fueled intruder with nothing to lose. And yet, he didn't walk away unscathed. When deputies located Cole walking shirtless and bleeding a few blocks away, they believed at first that he might have been a victim of a stabbing. Only later did they realize his wounds were likely the result of a fight inside the Edman home. He had deep cuts on his hands and arms, defensive wounds, or injuries from his own weapon. He was bleeding heavily, possibly from wounds sustained during a struggle with Khyler. He showed signs of being in a disturbed state, consistent with drug use or psychosis. In court, prosecutors suggested that Khyler may have fought back fiercely, despite being overpowered. His injuries and Cole's told story of chaos, desperation, and resistance. The medical examiner's report was gut-wrenching. Khyler had suffered multiple stab wounds, including wounds to his torso and upper body. There were also defensive wounds on his arms, proof that he had raised them to shield himself, proof that he had fought. The cause of death was determined to be blood loss due to sharp force trauma. But there was something else. Despite the number and severity of the injuries, Khyler had held on long enough for his sister to survive. He had bought her time. Imagine that for a moment. A child, bleeding, terrified, still refusing to back down, because something inside him said, "She goes first." Very little information has been made public about Khyler's sister, and rightfully so. She is a minor. Her identity has been protected. But what we do know is that she was found alive, physically unharmed, and in another part of the house. Some reports suggest Khyler may have led her away or closed the door behind her. We may never know the exact details. But what we do know with certainty is that she survived because he did not run, and because he did not scream for help. He fought. At that moment, Khyler Edman became everything his sister needed. He was a brother. He was a wall. He was a savior. By the time law enforcement made their way through the home, following the trail of blood and broken glass, they knew something horrific had occurred. Sheriff Bill Prummel would later call it one of the most disturbing crime scenes I've ever seen. The crime scene photos were never released to the public, but they were shown during the trial. Jurors wept. Even seasoned officers struggled to speak about what they witnessed. And in the middle of that horror was a child, a boy, who had made a grown man bleed before giving his final breath. When news broke of what happened, of how a 15-year-old had died saving a 5-year-old, there was national outrage. Social media exploded with tributes. Local vigils were held. Neighbors and classmates lit candles, left handwritten letters, and wept together outside the Edman home. One message, left outside, simply read, "A hero lived here. He still does." In the days that followed, a GoFundMe page was launched to help the family with funeral expenses and counseling. The campaign described Khyler as a courageous young man who tried to protect his home and sister from an intruder and ultimately lost his life. Donations poured in from all over the country. People who had never met Khyler, people who had only read his name in the news, felt something. Because it's not just a story of violence. It's a story of bravery in the face of absolute evil. How does a teenager find the strength to stand against a monster? How does a child become a shield? And what does it say about the world we live in? When a 15-year-old has to die to save a 5-year-old from a man who should never have been on the streets, we'll hear the defense, the arguments, the verdict, and we'll ask, can there ever be justice for the death of a child who died saving another? Or is the sentence always too late? When deputies first laid eyes on Ryan Cole, he looked like a man who had been in a fight. He was shirtless, bleeding, pacing barefoot through a quiet residential neighborhood. His arms were streaked with blood. Some his, some not. His movements were erratic. Neighbors had called 911 not because he looked dangerous, but because he looked lost. But that was only the surface. Because what officers didn't yet know was that they had just encountered the man responsible for one of the most horrifying crimes in Charlotte County's recent history. They had met the killer. They just hadn't found his crime scene yet. Shortly after 4 p.m. on September 26, 2019, multiple calls came into the Charlotte County Sheriff's Office. Witnesses described a man moving strangely through backyards. He appeared injured, barefoot, possibly on drugs. Deputies located him near Starlight Lane. He was cooperative at first, at least outwardly, but there was blood, too much blood, and no clear explanation. They detained him under suspicion of burglary and resisting arrest. He was placed in custody. But then the questions began. Where had he been? Whose blood was that? And most of all, was anyone else hurt? What happened next changed everything. As deputies followed the general direction Cole had come from, they noticed something chilling, a trail of blood, drops, smears, footprints that led them back to a modest home on Starlight Lane. The front door was damaged. The inside was silent. There was no response. And then officers entered. Inside the Edman home, officers found what they would later describe as a scene of pure horror. According to sworn testimony and police statements, furniture had been overturned. Blood was present in multiple areas of the home, most heavily near the entrance and hallway. Broken items on the floor indicated signs of a struggle. A young male, later confirmed as Khyler Edman, was found deceased near the entryway. A 5-year-old child was found in another room, physically unharmed but emotionally shaken. Deputies quickly realized that the man they had already taken into custody was connected to this house, connected to this blood, connected to this death. And suddenly, burglary became homicide. Crime scene technicians worked methodically. They began cataloging blood spatter, DNA evidence, and the layout of the house. They noted defensive wounds on Khyler, indicating he had fought back. They recorded signs of forced entry. They collected fingerprints, including Cole's. The timeline that unfolded was stark. Ryan Cole had broken into another home just minutes earlier. After fleeing from that scene, he stumbled upon the Edman home. He entered through an unlocked door or forced his way in. Khyler confronted him in the entryway, likely attempting to hold him off. A fight broke out. A weapon was used, believed to be a knife or sharp object, though the specific item was not recovered in public reports. Khyler sustained multiple stab wounds, including to his chest and upper body. His younger sister was either ushered away during struggle or remained hidden until the chaos subsided. Ryan Cole then fled the scene, bleeding from injuries likely sustained during the altercation, and was located blocks away by deputies. Though the crime scene photos were never released to the public, jurors later viewed them during trial. According to reports from courtroom observers, the images left many visibly shaken. Even seasoned investigators reportedly struggled to describe the scene without emotion. Chief Assistant State Attorney Rich Montecalvo later stated, "This is one of the worst crimes we've ever had to prosecute. The evidence speaks for itself. A child was brutally murdered while protecting another. The forensic evidence was overwhelming. DNA testing confirmed that the blood on Ryan Cole's body matched Khyler Edman's. Additional blood spatter patterns supported the theory of a close-range struggle. Footprints, both barefoot and bloodied, connected Cole to the interior layout of the home. Surveillance footage from a neighbor's camera showed a shirtless man, later identified as Cole, passing through adjacent properties around the same time of the murder. There was no doubt Ryan Cole had been in that house. He had fought with Khyler, and he had walked away while the boy lay dying." In the days that followed, Charlotte County Sheriff Bill Prummel held a press conference. His words were brief but powerful. "This senseless act of violence is devastating. Our hearts break for this family. We are pursuing full justice." Other officials echoed the same message. The act was random. The family did not know Cole. The community was shaken, but not broken. With the crime scene processed and Cole in custody, charges were quickly upgraded from burglary to second-degree murder, and eventually to first-degree murder as the evidence mounted. Prosecutors began building a capital case, and the public began watching closely, because this wasn't just about a criminal act. It was about a system that many believed had failed to intervene earlier. How many times had Cole been arrested before? Why wasn't he incarcerated? How did a man with his history end up walking free into a neighborhood full of children? Outside the yellow crime scene tape, neighbors gathered. Some held candles. Others left notes. One note simply read, "You did not die in vain." But for investigators, this was far from over, because this crime didn't just demand answers. It demanded justice, and that would be decided in a courtroom. We enter the courtroom. We'll hear the voices of the prosecutors, the defense, the judge, and the experts. We'll hear arguments about mental health, drug addiction, and accountability. And we'll ask, when a child dies protecting another, can the law ever truly repay what was lost? By the time Ryan Clayton Cole sat before a Florida jury, the world already knew what he had done. The headlines said it plainly: 15-year-old killed while protecting sister in home invasion. Ryan Cole charged with first-degree murder. Brave teen dies a hero. But the courtroom wasn't about headlines. It was about facts, about evidence, about deciding what punishment fits the man responsible for one of the most haunting crimes in Charlotte County's history. The trial was held in Charlotte County Circuit Court. Cole stood accused of first-degree murder for the death of Khyler Edman, burglary with assault or battery, burglary of a dwelling. He pled not guilty. From the outset, prosecutors described the case as gruesome, disturbing, and completely unjustified. They argued that Cole knew what he was doing, despite his drug use, despite his erratic behavior, and that Khyler Edman died trying to save his sister from a man fully capable of making deadly choices. The defense didn't deny the facts. They didn't argue that Khyler hadn't died, or that Cole hadn't been in the house. They couldn't. The blood evidence, the DNA, the neighbor footage, it was irrefutable. Instead, the defense asked the jury to consider why Ryan Cole did what he did. They called it a blackout, a drug-induced psychotic state, the result of years of addiction and untreated mental illness. Cole's attorneys brought in a forensic psychologist who had evaluated him during pretrial detention. The expert testified that Cole had a long history of severe substance abuse, including methamphetamines and synthetic cannabinoids, diagnosed mental illness, including bipolar disorder and psychosis, childhood trauma, which allegedly contributed to long-term emotional instability. They argued that Cole was in the midst of a drug-fueled psychotic episode when he entered the Edman home. He was hallucinating. He wasn't rational. He didn't know what he was doing. They painted a portrait not of a monster, but of a broken man spiraling out of control. But the prosecution had one devastating question. Even if he was broken, why did Khyler have to die? Prosecutors from the 20th Judicial Circuit came armed with facts, cold and unrelenting. They reminded the jury. Cole had a criminal history spanning over a decade. He had been arrested at least 20 times. He had violated probation again and again. He had failed to complete drug treatment multiple times. He had broken into another home just minutes before entering the Edman house. They called Cole a repeat offender, not a victim of circumstance. They played 911 audio. They showed the crime scene photos, images of Khyler's bloody body, the overturned furniture, the chaos inside the home. Jurors wept. Even seasoned officers were disturbed by the level of violence. Assistant State Attorney Rich Montecalvo said it bluntly. This wasn't just a killing. This was slaughter. A child was butchered in his own home while trying to protect his baby sister. If the death penalty is not for this case, then what is it for? Day after day, the jury listened. They watched. They absorbed the horror. Cole sat quietly through most of the proceedings. He showed little emotion. He offered no apology. And the evidence kept coming. Blood patterns matching the struggle described by the forensic pathologist. Photos of the wounds on Cole's own arms, likely sustained while stabbing Khyler. Surveillance footage showing Cole fleeing the neighborhood, bloodied and shirtless. Expert testimony stating that despite his drug use, he knew what he was doing. Proof that Cole had a pattern of escalating violence and refused treatment when offered. After days of testimony, the jury retired to deliberate. They didn't take long. The verdict was delivered in May 2024. Guilty on all counts. Cole was convicted of first-degree murder, burglary with assault or battery, burglary of a dwelling. The jury also found aggravating circumstances, a key factor in recommending the death penalty. Those aggravators included: the victim was a minor. The act was heinous, atrocious, and cruel. The crime occurred during the commission of another felony. The act was cold, calculated, and premeditated, even in a drug-induced state. On July 7, 2025, Judge Lisa Porter handed down the final sentence. Her words were clear. You broke into a child's home. You attacked an unarmed boy. You destroyed a family. This court finds no justification and no mercy for your actions. She sentenced Cole to death for the first-degree murder of Khyler Edman, life in prison for burglary with assault, an additional 5 years for burglary of the second home. The courtroom was silent. Khyler's family wept. Cole stared ahead. No apology. No visible regret. After the verdict, Charlotte County Sheriff Bill Prummel issued a statement. This child gave his life for his sister. A true hero. The community will never forget him. Social media again erupted with tributes. Hashtag Justice for Khyler trended. Candlelight vigils were held across Florida. Local leaders called for tougher sentences for repeat offenders. But even with justice served, a question lingered. What if the system had intervened sooner? What if Ryan Cole had been kept in treatment? What if a judge, a probation officer, a counselor had seen what was coming? We'll never know. What we do know is this: a child is dead, a family shattered, and a community left with scars that will never fully heal. We walk the long, narrow hallway of death row. Ryan Cole now waits in silence. But what does justice look like? When the hero will never grow up, and the killer gets to appeal, it's done. The verdict has been read. The sentence delivered. The courtroom is empty now. But justice doesn't echo in silence. It lingers. And so Ryan Cole, convicted murderer of 15-year-old Khyler Edman, has begun his final chapter. A death sentence. Florida's state prison. Death row. But does that sentence bring peace? Or is it just another waiting room between horror and history? At precisely 12:30 p.m. on July 7th, 2025, Judge Lisa Porter looked Ryan Cole in the eyes. He stood still, hands shackled, face blank. No apology, no tears, no final words. She told him plainly, the brutality of this crime, the vulnerability of the victim, and your long history of violence leave this court no room for leniency. And then she sentenced him to death for the murder of Khyler Edman. In addition, Life in prison for burglary with assault or battery. 5 years for burglary of a second residence. Each count running consecutively. It was final. It was full. It was the harshest penalty allowed under Florida law. But was it enough? Following the sentencing, Cole was processed and transferred to Florida State Prison in Rayford, home to the state's death row population. There, he joined over 280 inmates awaiting execution. His new reality? A 6 by 9 foot cell. Solid steel doors. 23 hours a day in isolation. No physical contact. Limited privileges. Constant surveillance. Inmates on death row are not placed in general population. They don't participate in communal activities. They don't get jobs or yard time like other prisoners. They wait, sometimes for decades. In Florida, a death sentence automatically triggers an appeal, a safeguard designed to prevent wrongful executions. Ryan Cole's case was no different. The process begins with a direct appeal to the Florida Supreme Court, review of trial transcripts, evidence, and procedure, arguments over due process, jury conduct, and judicial fairness. This appeal is not optional. It is required by state law. If the Florida Supreme Court upholds the sentence, Cole can still pursue post-conviction relief, federal habeas corpus petitions, clemency applications. But statistically, the odds are stacked. Florida has executed 105 people since 1976, and most who sit on death row die there. Some never make it to the chamber. They die from illness, suicide, or old age. Inside those prison walls, time has not passed normally. Inmates live in almost total silence. They eat in their cells. They read legal documents. Some write letters to family, or to no one at all. There are no televisions, no group recreation, just stillness and waiting. According to Florida Department of Corrections guidelines, executions are carried out by lethal injection. A secondary method, electrocution, remains legal if the inmate chooses it. Execution dates are set only after all appeals have been exhausted, which means Ryan Cole may sit in that small cell for years, maybe decades, and still, he'll live longer than the boy he murdered. Following sentencing, Khyler Edman's family released a public statement. No sentence can bring our son back, but we are grateful that the justice system saw his bravery and gave his life the value it deserved. They thanked the community, the investigators, and the prosecution team. But they also asked for privacy, because even with the trial over, grief continues. A mother lost her son. A sister lost her brother. A family lost their center. And no prison cell, no electric chair, no needle can undo that loss. Assistant State Attorney Rich Montecalvo, who led the prosecution, said after the hearing, "Cases like this are why the death penalty exists. This was not just a crime. It was a terror inflicted on a family and a community. A child in his own home, slaughtered while protecting his sister." Florida law speaks loudly in response. Sheriff Bill Prummel echoed the sentiment. Our community will never forget Khyler. He showed more courage in 15 years than many do in a lifetime. While Cole now lives behind steel and concrete, Khyler's name lives on in sunlight, vigils, murals, hashtags. His story has been shared thousands of times across the country. Teachers remember him as kind. Friends remember him as loyal. His mother remembers him as her protector. Khyler had dreams to be a firefighter or paramedic. He wanted to save lives. And in the end, he did. But what do we make of this ending? The killer is locked away. The verdict was delivered. The gavel has fallen. Yet the hero is still gone. The death penalty remains one of the most debated topics in American justice. For some, Cole's sentence is just a final reckoning, a deserved end. For others, it raises questions. Does execution bring closure? Or does it continue a cycle of violence? Would life in prison have been a greater punishment? Can any sentence truly match the weight of a child's final breath? These are not easy questions, but they are important ones. Because the justice system doesn't just punish. It reflects us. And in the case of Ryan Cole, it said this: you took a life. Now the state will take yours. Today, Ryan Cole wakes in a prison cell. He is counted. He is fed. He is watched. His name will appear on execution watch lists, legal dockets, and appeal registers. But for most, he will be forgotten. While Khyler Edman, age 15, brave beyond words, will remain in memory, in legacy, in the quiet love of a sister who still walks the world he saved. But justice doesn't end at sentencing. Now the appeals begin. Now the system faces its final test. And the question shifts again. Will the sentence ever be carried out? Or will Khyler's killer remain alive longer than the boy he murdered? The trial is over. The sentence has been handed down. A killer has been condemned. But in the quiet moments that follow a courtroom's final gavel, another trial begins. One with no jury and no judge. The trial of the heart. Because while the state of Florida sentenced Ryan Cole to die, others still ask, is that justice? Or is it something else? Is it closure or vengeance? And who really gets to decide? Florida is one of 24 U.S. states that currently uphold the death penalty. And among them, it ranks among the most active in executions. In fact, according to the Death Penalty Information Center, Florida has executed 105 individuals since the death penalty was reinstated nationally in 1976. In Cole's case, prosecutors never hesitated. From the beginning, they sought capital punishment, calling the crime heinous beyond measure, and the reason the death penalty exists. But even as the community rallied behind the verdict, debate intensified. Because when a child dies, when a family is shattered, when grief burns like fire, the line between justice and retribution can become dangerously thin. Following the sentencing, public opinion split into two clear camps, though most shared one truth. Khyler Edman was a hero. Supporters of the death penalty called it a deserved punishment, the only way to match the horror of the crime, a deterrent for future monsters, justice for a boy who gave his life to save another. One viral comment read, "Khyler didn't get a second chance. Why should Cole?" But others, even some who condemned Cole, questioned the sentence. They asked, does execution make us any better? Is life in a 6x9 cell for 50 years not a greater punishment? Should a mentally unstable man die if the system failed to treat him first? Religious leaders, activists, and human rights organizations raise the same concern. If the goal is healing, can death bring it? This isn't an abstract question, because during trial, the defense argued, with medical backing, that Ryan Cole suffered from persistent mental illness, bipolar disorder, psychotic episodes, childhood trauma, substance-induced psychosis. Florida law allows the death penalty even for the mentally ill, unless a person is declared legally insane or intellectually disabled at the time of the crime. In Cole's case, the court ruled that despite his conditions, he understood his actions. A forensic expert testified that while Cole may have been impaired by drugs, he was not legally insane, and thus eligible for the death penalty under state law. Still, questions linger. Was Cole a killer by intent, or a time bomb the system failed to defuse? Under Florida's capital sentencing guidelines, a jury may recommend death if at least one aggravating factor exists, and those factors outweigh any mitigating evidence. In Cole's case, the jury found multiple aggravators. The victim was a child. The act was heinous, atrocious, or cruel. The crime occurred during the commission of a felony, burglary. The murder was cold and calculated. The defense presented mitigating factors: history of mental illness, history of drug addiction, evidence of past trauma. But the jury voted unanimously in favor of death. That decision was not made lightly. Jurors later described being haunted by the crime scene photos and deeply moved by Khyler's story. One juror, who remained anonymous, said, "We cried, we prayed, and in the end we believed this was the only answer that matched what was taken." Throughout the proceedings, Khyler's family remained mostly silent, only issuing brief statements through court channels. They expressed thanks to the prosecution team, law enforcement, and the public. They described Khyler as the kind of son any parent would be proud of, courageous, kind, and protective. A hero not because of how he died, but how he lived. But when asked if the death sentence brought closure, they said simply, "Nothing brings him back." In American criminal justice, Closure is often discussed, but for victims' families, finality is rarely that simple. Because even after sentencing, appeals begin. Execution dates are delayed. Media attention resurfaces. The story reopens again and again. The average wait time on death row in Florida is over 16 years, according to state data, which means Khyler's family may face decades of hearings, petitions, and media requests, all reawakening trauma. So again, we must ask, is the death penalty justice, or just another sentence for the living? This case didn't just put one man on trial. It forced a community and a country to look at the cracks in our system. Because Ryan Cole wasn't invisible before this. He was arrested more than 20 times, known for drug abuse and violence, held under the Baker Act for psychiatric evaluation, ordered to complete rehabilitation programs, and failed. Each of those moments was an opportunity. Each of those reports, a red flag. Each of those failures, a step toward tragedy. So now, justice asks more than punishment. It asks for accountability, not just for the killer, but for the system that let him walk free. In the end, we must confront a chilling truth. Ryan Cole's fate is sealed. Khyler Edman's life is gone, but our choices still remain. What do we value more? Punishment or prevention? Finality or reform? Justice or something that looks like it? Because one family will never stop mourning. One sister will never forget. And one boy, just 15, gave us a glimpse of courage we didn't know we needed. The courtroom is silent. The gavel has fallen. And the people of Charlotte County have gone back to their lives. But for Ryan Cole, time has changed. Now every tick of the clock moves in one direction, toward a cell, and eventually a chamber. Because when the sentence is death, the state sets a clock. And whether it runs fast or slow, it never stops. After sentencing in July 2025, Ryan Cole was transferred to Florida State Prison in Rayford, Florida, the same facility where the state carries out all executions. This maximum security compound houses death row inmates in a separate wing, known for solitary confinement, minimal human interaction, cells the size of walk-in closets, 23 hours of isolation per day, limited visitation, and no physical contact with family or attorneys. Cole now joins over 290 individuals awaiting execution, according to the Florida Department of Corrections, FDC. And here's the reality. The vast majority of them will wait for years, decades. In Florida, a death sentence is not the end. It's the start of an extensive post-conviction process. By law, every death sentence automatically triggers a direct appeal to the Florida Supreme Court, whether the inmate requests it or not. That appeal will examine the trial transcript, jury conduct, evidence, handling, judicial instructions, claims of prosecutorial misconduct, any procedural errors. If the conviction or sentence is upheld, the defense may file for post-conviction relief in state court, federal habeas corpus petitions, U.S. Supreme Court review rarely granted. Only after these layers are exhausted can the governor of Florida sign a death warrant. Under Florida law, clemency is the final safeguard before execution. It is a constitutional power granted to the governor, who may commute a death sentence to life without parole, issue a full pardon, extremely rare, deny clemency, allowing execution to proceed. Before any clemency decision, a hearing may be held before the Florida Board of Executive Clemency, which includes the governor, the attorney general, the chief financial officer, the commissioner of agriculture. But the governor alone makes the final decision on death penalty clemency. In recent decades, Florida governors, including Ron DeSantis, have shown strong support for capital punishment, rarely granting clemency to condemned inmates. If and when a death warrant is signed, the Department of Corrections prepares for execution, typically with 30 days' notice. Florida uses lethal injection as the primary method. The electric chair, known as Old Sparky, remains a legal option if the inmate chooses it, though it has not been used since 1999. The lethal injection protocol includes etomidate sedative, rocuronium bromide paralytic, potassium acetate or chloride stops the heart. All executions take place at Florida State Prison in Rayford, typically scheduled for 6 p.m. Witnesses include family members of the victim, the press, state officials, the inmate's chosen spiritual advisor. Repeat button history of delays. The average time between sentencing and execution in Florida is over 16 years, according to the U.S. Department of Justice. Many inmates spend decades on death row due to backlogged appeals, legal technicalities, shifts in court precedent, new evidence reviews, shifting political climates. Even when execution is scheduled, last-minute stays are common. In 2023, Florida resumed executions after a 3-year pause, indicating a renewed commitment to capital enforcement. But critics argue the system is slow, costly, and emotionally grueling, especially for victims' families. For death row inmates like Ryan Cole, the wait itself becomes part of the punishment. In 2017, the U.S. Supreme Court declined to review a case challenging the psychological torment of long-term solitary confinement before execution, though international human rights organizations consider it a form of cruel and unusual punishment. Conditions reported include sleep deprivation, paranoia, depression, suicidal ideation, delusional behavior. But advocates for the death penalty argue that such conditions are the consequence of one's actions, not the system's cruelty. As of this writing, Ryan Cole remains incarcerated on Florida's death row. His automatic appeal is in progress. He has not been assigned an execution date. No clemency petition has been filed. He is allowed visits from legal counsel and spiritual advisors only. The Edman family has not made further public statements. What lies ahead for Cole is a path walked by hundreds before him, but paved with uncertainty, legal battles, and procedural delays. For Khyler's loved ones, the question remains, when, if ever, will the sentence truly be carried out? Some families of victims say execution provides closure. Others say it reopens wounds with every appeal, every media mention, every hearing. One thing is clear: time does not heal all wounds, especially when justice moves slower than grief. Florida's execution system has drawn both praise and criticism. Supporters argue it upholds justice, deters future crime, honors victims and families, prevents repeat offenses. Opponents argue it is expensive, averaging $1.3 million more per case than life imprisonment. It risks executing the mentally ill. It subjects families to prolonged trauma. It doesn't reverse the loss. In Cole's case, supporters of the sentence say the verdict speaks for itself. But even now, years may pass before the sentence is ever carried out. And so the clock ticks on. Ryan Cole waits in a box, watching time evaporate. Khyler Edman's family waits for the system to keep its promise. And the rest of us are left to wonder, what does it really mean when we say justice delayed is justice denied? We leave the courtroom, the prison walls, and return to what matters most. Who was Khyler Edman? What did we lose? And how do we carry his legacy? When his voice is gone, he should have turned 16. He should have graduated high school. He should have gone to prom, fallen in love, walked across a stage in a cap and gown. He should have grown up. But instead, Khyler Edman is remembered as something very few people, no matter their age, will ever be. A hero, and not in theory, not in fiction, not in a headline written after the fact. He became a hero in real time, in real danger, in the moment that would define everything that followed. Khyler Edman was born in 2004. He was a student at Charlotte High School in Port Charlotte, Florida. Teachers described him as respectful, quiet, and mature beyond his years. Friends said he was loyal. Neighbors said he was trustworthy. And at home, he was the protector. He was the kind of kid you trusted to babysit a sibling, run errands, or help a neighbor carry groceries. He had dreams, big ones. According to family statements and news interviews, Khyler wanted to become a first responder, possibly a firefighter or paramedic. He talked about it often. He wanted to help people. And on September 26, 2019, he did. When Ryan Cole broke into the Edman family home, Khyler did not run. He did not beg. He did not hide. He stood up. He confronted a violent intruder, likely armed with nothing but instinct and love for his little sister. He fought. And according to forensic evidence and law enforcement testimony, he gave everything to keep her safe. His 5-year-old sister survived that day, physically unharmed, because her brother died protecting her. Khyler's body was found near the front entrance. Defensive wounds on his arms, multiple stab wounds to his chest. He was 15 years old, and he died a warrior. In the days following his death, Port Charlotte grieved like a family. Candlelight vigils were held. Memorial signs went up. Neighbors left flowers, handwritten notes, and photos of Khyler smiling, in a school uniform, in football gear, riding a bicycle. A GoFundMe page raised funds for the family's funeral costs and future trauma therapy. Thousands contributed. Many wrote messages like, "You were too good for this world. You protected her with everything you had. Thank you, Khyler. We didn't deserve you." One handwritten sign taped to a fence read, "A hero lived here." In the months after his death, Charlotte High School organized tributes. A moment of silence was held at football games. Students wore black ribbons pinned to their shirts. Faculty posted messages celebrating his bravery. Local youth organizations nominated him posthumously for civic bravery awards. In one classroom, a teacher placed a candle in the window with a photo of Khyler beneath it. She wrote on the board, "Real heroes don't wear capes. Sometimes they're just big brothers." Charlotte County Sheriff Bill Prummel, during multiple press conferences and media interviews, did not mince words. There's a special place in this world for young men like Khyler Edman. He acted with courage. No one should ever have to show at his age. He saved a life, and he gave his own. Assistant State Attorney Rich Montecalvo echoed that sentiment. He did everything right, everything a big brother, a protector, should do. We will never forget him. Khyler's mother has largely stayed out of the public eye since the trial began, but early on, she spoke to local media. She described her son as, "My world, my quiet protector. He always looked out for his sister." She added, "He had dreams, and he loved helping people. I don't know how I'll go on, but I know he saved her, and he never deserved to go that way." After sentencing, the family released a written statement. "We are grateful for justice, but justice doesn't bring him back. Nothing does." National news picked up Khyler's story. Major outlets like CNN, Fox, CBS, and the Associated Press ran headlines. 15-year-old dies protecting sister in Florida home invasion. Teen hero killed by intruder during home burglary. Boy remembered as a brave protector. Social media platforms like Twitter, Facebook, and TikTok lit up with tributes, including the hashtag Justice for Khyler. Millions of views, millions of tears. He became a symbol, not just of loss, but of selflessness. There is no foundation yet, no annual scholarship, no documentary on a major network. But Khyler's story lives on in whispers, passed from parent to child, from teacher to student, in classrooms, in churches, in conversations that begin with, "Did you hear about that boy who saved his sister?" Because real heroes don't ask for attention. They just act. This story is about a boy who died, but it's also about what he chose. He didn't choose violence. He didn't choose fear. He chose love and action. In the face of evil, unrelenting, drug-fueled, and violent, he held the line. And that line was the space between his sister and death. We've now heard every angle. We've seen the courtroom. We've walked the blood-stained hallway. We've studied the appeals. We've watched the clock start ticking for a killer. But in the end,